You pay a lot of money for the perfect vacation, and we all plan to enjoy wonderful, relaxing experiences. Unfortunately, life happens, and we have to plan for the unexpected too, which is why many folks opt to purchase travel insurance. What I see time after time, however, is that people make assumptions about what insurance covers and what it doesn't, leading many to skip insurance purchases they might otherwise want or purchase the wrong type of insurance for their needs. I'm Bill from cruisehabit.com, and in this video, we'll talk about what you absolutely must consider before deciding whether or not to buy insurance for your next cruise. Before we start, a quick disclaimer. None of what we're going to discuss is intended to recommend any particular policy or provide legal or financial advice. There are an infinite number of possibilities around canceling your trip, seeking care on your trip, etc. So this video highlights only a few considerations. Discuss this information with your travel agent, insurance representative, or other travel professional. Now, on to the important stuff. The very first question, whenever this comes up in conversation or somebody asks me online about insurance, I say, well, consider, what circumstance are you looking to protect against? Is it cancellation? That's very common. Maybe it's because of cancellation for illness or injury, or maybe just a family emergency. Cruise lines aren't unsympathetic, but they are businesses and they usually don't budge on their cancellation policies. Now, some policies cover cancellation even if it's a loved one that's ill or injured, even if they're not traveling with you. And this can be really helpful if you're a caretaker for someone who may or may not be traveling with you. There are other insurance policies that are canceled for any reason. I will bring this up a couple times. Just know that these usually cost a lot more than other policies, and frequently only a percentage of the trip is covered or reimbursed if you cancel for a reason other than one of the ones we'll discuss here. If you are concerned about having to cancel, especially if it's for medical reasons, are pre-existing conditions covered? Some policies, the answer is yes, and some is no, so you want to check that out. What about interruption, trip interruption? If something happens in the middle of your trip where you're not able to continue, or delay, maybe the first part of your trip, a pre-cruise hotel, is impacted. What about lost or delayed baggage? Medical expenses. So maybe you make it onto the trip, you can make it through the whole trip, but you have to see a physician or some other medical provider on the ship or on land. If it's really bad, what about medical evacuation? It can be extremely expensive to get to a place with a higher level of medical care, depending on where you are. And repatriation. If something happens and someone in your party dies, it is wildly expensive to bring the remains back to another country frequently. So with all those things, you think about, okay, well, what am I actually covering? Sure, those are the circumstances I'm thinking about now, but what parts of the trip? Right? So here we're talking about cruises, but what about air before and after your cruise? A private car. I actually know someone that was in an accident on the way to their cruise, and trip insurance covered a lot of what private auto insurance didn't, in fact. Same with a train, taxi, Uber, car service, your post-cruise hotel, that can be expensive, of course, and even land tours. While we're talking about cruising here, a lot of this could apply to a trip that doesn't even involve a cruise or that has a land tour as a portion of it. Now, beyond what are you protecting against, think about where the limits, where you actually might need insurance and where cruise lines or other tour operators already have you covered in some ways. So what are the cruise line policies for those circumstances? In terms of cancellation, since that's a big one, understand that cancellation policies vary a lot by cruise line depending on where you are in the world, when you're booking. So understand what those are. If your cruise is canceled, by the way, you don't pay. If the cruise line cancels, and I see this, to some this may be obvious, but you know, everyone has different levels of experience with cruising. So it gets asked, but it's true. If the cruise line cancels your cruise, you're not the one paying for that, right? Things happen, and it's not common that cruise lines cancel, but that's not something you need insurance for. Now, a cruise line might change an itinerary or make other adjustments to your cruise, and some insurance policies will actually compensate you if there's a port change or a missed port. Some will allow you to cancel if the cruise is materially changed. Depends on the policy. Cancellations overall aren't common, though. A lot of folks talk about cancellations due to weather, and just so you know, those are very frequently made last minute. Lines might help in those cases with other arrangements. They might say, well, we'll reimburse you up to however many hundreds of dollars on lost flights or flight changes, but they're often very last minute, so it could be more costly, or you might even have already started traveling. Just keep that in mind, because while cruise lines can help out in those circumstances, the timing can get funny. If you choose not to go on your own because of personal reasons, talking about largely weather here again, I see this come up with hurricanes. So you see a storm coming and you say, no, I got insurance. I'm not going on that cruise because there's a hurricane coming. Well, no, that's your choice that you're not going to sail. And unless you have cancel for any reason coverage, then your insurance policy isn't going to pay. I know there are a lot of questions about cruising during hurricane season, and I would encourage you to go over to cruisehabit.com/hurricanes. We'll put a link down below where I think we cover that pretty well. What about flights and hotels booked through your cruise, right? That's where I talk about what's already covered by the cruise lines. Well, if you booked your cruise and the cruise line, whether you did it directly or your travel agent did it, if the cruise line is kind of including the hotel, pre or post cruise hotel, maybe your flights or other transfers, that's generally all covered under the same policy, to the extent that if one is canceled, they'll take care of the rest to make it right. It's important to understand how this works, but just know that if you're only worried, for example, about the air portion, and you book your air through the cruise line, or as part of a package in that way, if the cruise gets canceled, for example, the air is going to be canceled as well. This also means that if you booked your air independent of the cruise line, and let's say your flights are canceled, causing you to miss your cruise, miss your pre-cruise hotel, the cruise line's probably not going to reimburse you. They might work with you a little bit, but don't count on that. So that's a great area where, even though the policies for certain tour operators, cruise lines, and airlines may step in, they're only going to step in for their portion if you didn't book the other parts with them. Do me a quick favor, if you find this information helpful, just down below, click like, subscribe, ring the little bell so that you're alerted next time we post another video. It'd mean the world to us. Now, we talked about the policies, checking the policies of cruise lines and other providers, but what coverage do you already have in terms of insurance outside of them? Private medical insurance, for example, is a common one. Now, depending on your policy, if you're in the United States, you know policies vary wildly in terms of what is covered and what is not, how much. A lot of plans do cover emergency medical care outside of the country, and that includes on the ship. Some don't, though. So make sure you understand and know that you could still have significant out-of-pocket. So if I have to see the doctor in a different country or on the ship, I can submit that for reimbursement, and with my particular policy, that's going to get covered. But I'm going to have to pay upfront for that, and it could be weeks or even longer before the insurance company gives that back. Travel insurance can be a little bit better about that in providing the money quicker, or even working with certain hospitals in other countries. It depends, but it's something to keep in mind. That's for medical, by the way. Dental, vision, those generally aren't covered in the same way. You can check those policies, of course. Dental can be a big one because anything with your teeth can be very expensive. Fortunately, less so in certain other countries. And there's not really anything you can do about that on the ship for the most part. They don't have dentists on board. So understand that could be in and of itself a benefit to travel insurance, is making sure that that part is covered. Now, that was just talking about private insurance, right? You may also have insurance of sorts through credit cards. If you used a credit card to pay for your cruise, and there's a million good reasons to do that, make sure you pay it off right away. A lot of credit cards have trip protection built in. Not all do, however, and it's not, oh, Visa does, MasterCard doesn't, or anything like that. You'll need to check with your individual credit card, but this can be a great option. This is largely, though not exclusively, what I rely on, in fact, as someone who travels quite a bit. Only the portions of your trip that you booked with that credit, or that you paid for with that credit card, are covered, though. That means if somebody, let's say, gifted you a cruise and you bought the airfare with your credit card and something goes wrong on your cruise, it's not going to matter, right? It's only going to apply to that air part. Some cards, even if you see that protection is included, there are very different limits on some cards versus others, right? In terms of how much they'll pay for medical costs or for lost bags, things like that. Don't assume, by the way, that those credit cards branded with the cruise line, those, and I'm not meaning to pick on any, but Carnival, their card, or Celebrity's card, or NCL's card, don't assume that they're very good in most ways, to be honest with you. I'll put a link down below. I have an article I wrote a couple years ago comparing those cards, some of those cards at least, to a couple other more popular travel-related cards that I use and rely on. Either way, understand the limit of that coverage. Same concerns as far as will you have to pay out of pocket and get reimbursed? How quickly can they reimburse you? And in a lot of cases, these companies will have arrangements to, especially with credit cards, they'll have arrangements to make it easier to deal with those situations, kind of like a help desk of sorts that can also assist with the payment, but you want to understand also who is covered in those cases, right? If you buy an insurance policy for a trip, when you're purchasing that policy, they're going to go through and talk about, how many people are going and who's in your party. They're covered. But if that coverage that you're talking about now is from a credit card or private insurance, well, who is covered by that? Is it just you? Is it any members of your household, anyone traveling with you, anyone that you paid for? It's important to know. You wouldn't want to assume that, and because, you're all good, maybe somebody in your traveling party has an issue with a lost bag or a canceled flight, or they need to go to a doctor, and it's not going to cover them, perhaps. I should mention that this video and all things we do is sponsored by our friends at Touring Plans Travel. They book all of our travel, all of it. And in fact, the same folks at Touring Plans Travel have been taking care of my travel arrangements for over a decade. I entrust them with my travel, and that's why I recommend them to you, and I'm happy to work with them. So please help out the site, help out Cruise Habit, and help yourself by going to cruisehabit.com/help and getting a quote from Touring Plans Travel. So if at this point you're going through all these options, these possibilities, and you're thinking, okay, I think I need to get some type of insurance. How do I shop for trip insurance? Where do I get it? Well, a very popular option is to get insurance directly from the cruise line when you're going through that booking flow with them or with your travel agent. And that can be a great option. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but it's not necessarily the best option. In fact, most cruise lines aren't self-insuring in most cases, and there are exceptions. You're getting a third-party policy now from the cruise line that's been preset for the cruise line. Sometimes they'll give you an option of a couple of them, actually. Make sure you understand what that covers. If you're booking your air and pre-cruise arrangements through the cruise line, it's generally going to cover that. But if you're not, it's another reason to look for a third-party policy. In addition, the third-party policies, you're going to have a much greater variety of options, different coverage levels, different types of coverage. Maybe you're far more concerned with medical than with cancellation, or vice versa. You can really shop around and see better options and potentially save a lot of money in that way. There are brokerage sites that can help you with this. I'm kind of scared to name any because frankly I haven't used any of them, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm recommending something, but give it a search and you'll see there are a lot of websites that will let you put in some very basic information, and it'll show you what the available options are. None of them are going to list all of them, but it can be a good idea to see some of the companies that are out there. And a similar way of doing that, in fact, is with a travel agent. I talk a lot about using a good travel agent. In fact, it's my #1 cruise tip. And that's because it really does make a difference. And it can in this way too. Tell your travel agent, hey, this is what we're doing, and make sure you explain to them any parts of the trip that you're not booking with them, like airfare, for example, and see what insurance options they can provide. An added benefit of doing it this way, by the way, and this is a personal experience I had an Allianz policy. They're one of the largest insurance companies. I had a policy through them that my travel agent set up for me, and I actually had to file a claim. It was the only time I've had to file a trip insurance claim personally. It all went fine. They understandably, however, asked for a lot of documentation about the canceled cruise. Well, I just reached out to my travel agent and said, hey, I had to cancel. Here's what the insurance company is asking for. I just sent the email along. They took care of all that for me. So in the end, I just kind of had to sign a couple things. Made it a lot easier, especially in a situation where I was bummed because I wanted to go on the trip. And for what it's worth in that case, it went well and they paid very quickly, actually. With any of these, same things go, right? Just like what I was talking about with credit cards or with what cruise lines or other tour operators provide, understand the limits to that coverage. So when you're shopping for those policies, you're talking to a travel agent about it. How much will they pay for your trip? Is there a maximum? How much will they pay for your medical expenses, medical evacuation, lost bags? Lost bags, that's an easy one because medical evacuation, we think, well, that's not going to happen to me. And a lot of us, frankly, can't imagine how much money medical evacuation can cost. Trust me, it can be tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. But lost bags is an easy one because it's more relatable to most of us. So if you are looking at some of these policies, they say, oh, we'll reimburse you up to $50 for a lost bag. I don't know about you, my suitcase costs more than $50, never mind what's inside. So if you're looking for that money to replace, whether maybe it was a bunch of old t-shirts and underwear in the bag, or maybe it was your laptop and other things, you're probably going to want more than that. So look at those coverage levels and look at time constraints on all of this. And mostly here I'm talking about when you need to purchase a policy. If your policy is for cancellation protection, if that's the thing you're looking to get out of it, usually those need to either be purchased at the same time as your cruise, within 24 hours of your cruise, or sometimes it's just X months out before you've made final payment. And the reason for this is very simply that no insurance company wants you to book a cruise or any other trip, pay for it, be within a period of time that you'll be penalized to cancel, realize you can't go, and then get insurance. That doesn't fly. So that means if you're looking just for medical coverage, for example, usually that's not the same kind of, you don't have that same kind of timing issue, but it is important to think about pre-existing conditions still. If indeed you're not so much concerned with cancellation, maybe you want to kind of in that way self-insure, right? You think, well, cancellation policies, those are expensive, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to go, and if not, that's my risk. There are still those other concerns, lost baggage, medical, things like that. Well, there are annual policies that can cover you for an entire year, and they're often a lot less expensive because they're not going to reimburse for the cost of the trip itself. So when you're shopping around, you'll actually find frequently that an annual policy costs the same or less than a policy for just one trip. Just know, those annual policies are not going to help you if you're looking for protection against a canceled trip or a trip that you have to cancel. I hope you now feel a little better informed about purchasing travel insurance, whether or not to, the questions to ask, things like that. More than that, though, I hope you never have to use it. What I do hope you do is enjoy your cruise. And in fact, I'll send you over to our next video over on one side of the screen or the other. I don't know where I'm putting it. All about 12 things that you should do on the very first day of your cruise. I think that'll be helpful. Here we're talking about planning, but get on board, enjoy the cruise better, and yeah, give us a like, follow. Thanks for watching.